Olá, eu sou Camilo Rocha, DJ e jornalista e membro do conselho da Fervo Conference. A Fervo Conference é um evento criado para discutir e propor caminhos para a retomada dos eventos culturais e de entretenimento na cidade de São Paulo. Nossos dois eixos principais são o retorno seguro às atividades com o público e o fortalecimento de um setor que foi super afetado pela pandemia, né? Bom, na próxima mesa a gente vai saber um pouco sobre como outras cidades do mundo estão lidando com essa volta. Essas experiências de retomada, elas têm tido resultados diversos em países diferentes, né? Na Inglaterra e na Espanha, por exemplo, os eventos testes resultaram num número muito baixo de infectados por Covid. Já na Holanda, né, teve o caso de um festival de música que levou à contaminação por Covid de cerca de 2.000 pessoas. Bom, a conferência recebe agora o Lutz Leichsenring, uma das principais autoridades mundiais quando se fala em economia e setor criativo da noite, né? O Lutz é cofundador da consultoria Vibelab e porta-voz da Club Commission de Berlim. Ele vai falar para a gente sobre experiências e eventos testes na Alemanha e Holanda, quais protocolos foram adotados, quais os resultados de diferentes iniciativas, além de trazer ideias e sugestões para uma volta segura e também falar sobre a importância de se fortalecer à noite os eventos sociais. Esses são temas que inspiram a realização de um manifesto global da noite, que foi proposto pela Vibelab e vem sendo discutido coletivamente por agentes culturais de vários países. So, Lutz, I'd like to welcome you to Fervo Conference. Thank you so much for being with us.
Bom dia.
I'd like to start asking you if you could start by telling us about this event you had in Berlin in the weekend. Can you tell us what went on? It was like a test event.
Yes, the event that we had last weekend was very essential for the Berlin nightlife and club scene because we, the first time, tried out to do an event indoor. We had 6 different clubs opening their indoor venue, but also without mask and distance. So the only thing that was required was a PCR test. And the testing was quite a challenge because we had to test 2,000 people and another 120 people who work in the clubs or were artists. And they had been tested throughout Fridays. And then Friday night, they got their test result. And then they were able to buy the ticket finally. So in the beginning, they just had an option on a ticket. And then after a negative test, they could actually buy the ticket formally. And with this ticket, they were able to participate in 6 different clubs. They could even hop from one venue to another. So it was really a regular club night if you don't consider the bureaucratic waiting and application part before you were going out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So sorry again. So how many people did you have in all in this event?
We had 2,000 people. We also had another 120 people who are workers or artists in these 6 venues, and it was a research study conducted by the Club Commission, but also by a research by one of the biggest research institutes, the Charité in Berlin, which is the biggest hospital also.
Right. And can you give us a bit of an overview about how nightlife or club life in Berlin is coming back?
Well, the indoor clubs, all the dance floors are really shut down since March 2020. So we are in a constant lockdown when it comes to indoor clubbing and dance floors. The only thing what we could do is during the summertime last year, but also this year in the summer, we could use outdoor venues. So the outside spaces of a club, but also festivals, small festivals up to 1,000 people were taking place. And a lot of big festivals basically split up their festival in different weekends and had only 1,000 people every weekend participating. And in clubs, only outdoor venues could be used. So about 1/3 of Berlin's clubs could actually host guests because the other ones didn't have that kind of outdoor space to host events. And other than that, we're using a lot of testing rapid testing to enter venues. They are free in Germany to do a test, but it's also a bit annoying because you have to do it until a certain time of the day, because after that a lot of these testing stations are shut down.
Okay.
But I can say from my point of view, this summer feels a bit like regular because we actually have a lot of events. People can dance outdoors. They are supposed to wear masks. Not everybody who's wearing a mask on the dance floor, but still the incidents, the numbers of infections are fairly low considering how many people are actually meeting and dancing in the recent weeks and months.
Okay, so this return to the scene, well, maybe we're talking specifically about Berlin. How much has the club scene contributed or participated in how this return was carried out?
The Club Commission is an institution that exists now for 20 years, and we are very well connected on all different levels of administration and politics. So we work very closely with the Senate for Economics, the Senate for Culture, even the Senate for Health is now a strong partner. And so we're trying to make alliances, but we also know, and we are very realistic about it, that clubbing with a mask or with distance doesn't really work. We don't really believe in a clubbing experience where you have these kind of distance in place. So we also know that an infection happens very likely in an indoor place where people are breathing a lot, shouting, dancing, staying there for many, many hours. That is just the best place for a virus to spread. And with this in mind, we then argued a lot of, like in the recent month, just for financial support, which we received. So all the clubs receive a lot of money to pay their rents and to pay their employees. And I think we're very fortunate compared to other countries in the world, especially also in Europe, that we are, till today, we could save all the venues in Berlin. But we also know that as soon as we are reopening, there needs to be also some support because we won't have tourists in that high of number. We probably also won't have a lot of touring artists because still travel will be restricted. And so the reopening phase will be a very tough one. That's why we also didn't force it in the last month. Even the incidents are very low to reopen indoors. We believe that we have to be very careful because as soon as we're opening up, shutting down gonna be a catastrophe. It will be expensive, it will be dismotivative, and it will definitely be a big impact on the whole culture.
Okay, so would you say that the public in general, I mean the local public, obviously, because you're not getting so many people from outside the city now, are they going back normally to clubs, or do you feel a lot of people are still fearful being in a crowd, or thinking it could be unsafe?
I think people have to adjust, especially in the beginning, but people forget about the epidemic very fast as soon as they are in a crowd and they experience music. So I think there are a lot of people are back in party mode, I would say. So we are responsible as promoters and as clubs that we don't have a super spreading event happening. So this is our responsibility, and we have to take care that not only the people who are visiting us are safe, but also our workers. Maybe they have parents at home that are sick or whatever. So we really also have to take care of the workers in the clubs as well.
Okay. Well, I'd like if you could move over to Holland now, talk a bit about the situation there, which there was a very unfortunate case of contamination after a music festival. Something like 2,000 people got infected after this event. So what happened there? Could you talk a bit about the reopening in Holland, in Amsterdam, and what went wrong?
Yeah, the problem in Holland or in Netherlands was basically that politicians didn't listen to what the people who are actually developed strategies developed. They didn't listen. They just created regulations that were not really didn't have the safety net that was needed for this kind of events. First of all, the events were way too large, so they reopened it for people like 15 to 20 to more people, 15 to 20,000 people events. They didn't have a really specific safe way of testing, because tests can be faked. You know, if you're not making sure that the test result is actually the one that is given by the laboratory, people just make a PDF, change it with Photoshop. And it just needs one or two persons who are highly infected at an indoor place at a festival, like with a rooftop or something where it's not a lot of wind. You have a lot of people infected there. And so a lot of things that needed to be considered, you know, slow opening, testing events, making sure that things are reopening in a mindful way, wasn't in place. They just reopened nightlife at one point. And then, of course, things are just happening. And in this specific festival, I'm not sure if these 2,000 people were infected. I think it was a couple hundred, but still, they were using some kind of tents and almost indoor. It maybe officially was an outdoor venue, but you know, if you have a rooftop and not enough circulation of wind, there is a high chance that if you stay stuck in a group of people for many hours with that current Delta aggressive virus, you're just if you're not vaccinated and if you're not having any sort of mask or other protection, it's just dangerous. And that's what happened. People got infected, and you had a lot of negative PR, which is even worse because the whole industry is in danger if society doesn't want you to run. You know, if the society puts pressure on you and says this is too dangerous, you know, it's hard to still reopen.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because there was this survey that came out in the UK, and it's quite an impressive number. Like one in 4 people don't think the clubs should reopen ever. So
exactly,
it seems that it kind of fuels an old prejudices against this whole scene.
You have to be very careful, because nighttime industry, nighttime culture has a lot of prejudice. There's a lot of bias about the scene. And if I'm not saying that we have to accept everything people tell us what we have to do. We have to be still very bold, and we also have to be very confident about what we do. But we also have to listen to science, and we also have to make sure that we don't put people in danger. You know, we should be very careful and very reflected in what we're doing and how we do it. But for this, you also need the financial support of governments. If you don't have it, you're in a conflict of interest. You know, on one side you have to make money, on the other side you have to make sure that people are safe, and that is not a comfortable situation. And many countries have this problem, especially in the UK and in the Netherlands, where government support was not as good as in Germany, for instance.
Okay. By the way, I checked the figure for the music event in Holland. It's around 1,000 people. So
okay, yeah.
What you thought and I thought.
Okay, so I can just say that in this test event that we had last weekend in Berlin with PCR test, 7 people have been filtered out. They were infected, and 2 of them had a very high amount of virus in their body, which means that these 2 people would probably be very likely super spreader in one of the venues.
Okay. Right. So now, I mean, you are in contact with people from all over the world, from club night scenes all over the world. I mean, what's your feeling? What are the highlights of what you see have been happening around the world in terms of reopening?
I think the common goal must be that you give back self responsibility and self definition of every individual person. And to make that decision, you have to know if you're infectious or not. You cannot just, be in a situation of unknown and uncertainty. So, for instance, when we had in the 80s HIV spreading, and nobody knew because there was no way of testing it if you are infected or not. That was as even worse situation. But today, now we have the ability to test ourselves, and I think that must be a strategy. First of all, give people the availability to test themselves, to make a self-proclaimed decision. You have to make a decision based on your knowledge. And if you're infectious, you go home and stay home and recover. But if you have to have this information first. So testing needs to be available. And I think a lot of countries are understanding this now and giving more and more the opportunity to do testing. Secondly, vaccination. I know it's a personal decision that you have to make, but I also understand that everybody has to make up their mind, and it's also a personal health decision that you make. But are we really starting a conversation about 100 years of biotechnology and research and science by people who just watch YouTube videos and have an opinion? I think we also have to trust a bit in mankind and in what's happening. And I also I'm far away of just thinking that there is a big conspiracy happening and we have to just be against it. I believe we have a big threat and we have to make sure that we save lives, and vaccination is one piece of of helping getting out of the situation. So we do in Berlin this week, we do vaccination nights with DJs, because we said we have to make offers as much as possible and give people access to get vaccinated. That's the only thing what we at the moment have as a solution.
Right. Well, in New York, I mean, they are vaccination is mandatory for social events. Is there anything like that happening in Europe?
I think the discussion is a bit too early for Europe, because in the US they were a bit earlier with vaccinating people and offering vaccination. In Germany and in other countries in Europe, we were, let's say, 1 or 2 months after. And so I think this discussion will come up in the next 4 to 8 weeks. I think it is valid that it should be easier for people who are vaccinated, who contributed their part of the solution, that they have it easier to access venues. But we should definitely also think about people who maybe cannot be vaccinated because of their health and other issues. But then they have to maybe buy a test and make sure that they are not infecting anyone. So I think there needs to be a discussion. It's an ethical question, and maybe also some communities in nightlife are much more open about it than others who are more concerned. But I think as a society, and especially nighttime communities, have to now start this discussion. And I'm not making that decision for everyone. Every single community has to start this dialogue now and make sure that we get out of this together and not being divided.
Okay. Do you see a lot of denialism and fake news going around in the club scene and conspiracy theories? Do you think there could be, you find pockets of resistance to science and to obvious health measures going around?
Yeah, I mean, people who are anti-vaccinators, they also start to organize themselves in groups and start to manipulate as well. So I think there is a kind of a information war happening in the background, and I just want to be very constructive in all of this and say, I believe people are scared, and if they are scared, they should make their own decision. I cannot make it for them, but they should not start to make an information war about it, because it's not their decision for other people. Other people should also make their own decision. And currently, if you talk to the science community all over the world, and everybody recommends to get vaccinated, even if it's not the perfect safety net. Obviously, there is still the ability to get infected, but you still can help not to populate hospitals. And I think it's a risk that we should take, because it's obviously the best on science that we have at this moment. And we should also trust a bit science community, as much as we do it when we sit in a car and hope that the brakes work, as much as we believe it also for other sicknesses and health questions. Why don't we trust in this as well?
And it's also something for the collective, right? It's not just about you. Vaccination is not about you. It's about being part of a collective and contributing.
Of course, there's always a risk that other people who maybe have other sicknesses are in a critical health situation, that you affect their lives as well. So that's definitely also an aspect you have to think about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'd like you to talk a bit now about the Nighttime, the Global Manifesto. If you can share with us some of it that you've been involved, and tell us a bit about what that is.
So for us, it was very interesting. Last year, we started a project that is called Global Nighttime Recovery Plan. And the idea about this project was to get information from all over the world. How are cities, how are nighttime communities responding to this crisis? What are their solutions? What are their best cases, best practices? How can we learn from each other? And that's why we published these different chapters, 6 chapters until now, where we provided information from cities all over the world. And by having such a variety of information, such a knowledgeable base for a lot of community leaders and city decision makers, we also wanted to have a piece of paper that describes the whole situation for how this pandemic affects nighttime, and how we also have to look into the future. And there's so many things in a change now after this pandemic. We talk about how are office buildings used in the future, how are LGBTQ communities affected, and if they lose their venues where they regularly meet. How is the traveling affected? That you maybe, if you're in your early 20s, you're not allowed to travel somewhere to another part of the world and learn about other cultures and experiences. So a lot of things are changing to the negative. Some things are also positive, because if people now are shopping online, what is happening to all the shopping malls and to that consumption space in cities? Can they turn into cultural venues? So there's a lot of potential for discussion. And I think the Global Nighttime Manifesto is a collaborative approach where we invite community leaders, people from different parts of the world, to join a dialogue on how we want to, what is our message towards the community, but also towards decision makers. How do we define ourselves? What is for us is important at this moment? And this should be a very short manifesto, but to have it in a very compromised way, you have to have a lot of talks and conversations and discussions around it to really boil it down to the max. And that's what the process of the Global Nighttime Manifesto is about. We started this process a couple of days ago, and we invite people from Brazil, from other parts of Latin America, but also from Europe, Asia, and North America to join this dialogue and be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So, do you see the post-pandemic recovery? Is it? Do you see it as an opportunity for areas like nightlife and culture to be more valued? Their role in society, in the economy, in culture in general. I mean, do you think it's a good opportunity we have now?
I think there are opportunities, but to have this opportunity, you also have to be organized. Because if you want to sit at a table and discuss and claim to be part of something in the city, something in society, you also have to have representatives that are sitting at the table, you know. And so it's really important to have this advocacy, to have organizations, to have communication in your community around these topics. And we know that, you know, nighttime culture, club culture is not only about partying. It is very political. It is something that affects society. And we were always in the forefront of society, changes in our society. A lot of movements, a lot of music sounds came from marginalized communities that used music to transform their society. And I think it is our role now as well, post-pandemic, to start this discussion, but also be part of it. And you know, we can be, we should be very serious about it, to be, you know, to also to have to you know, to sit at a table when decisions are made. And that's, I think I have a big hope that this is gonna happen.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's something that you have been doing in Berlin for quite a while with the Club Commission, sitting at the table with authorities and key players in society. I mean, how did you manage to get to that position? I mean, that's been many years doing that. But if you could give us a bit of background, I think it would be quite illuminating to other scenes in the world. How did you achieve this position in Berlin?
I think to have this kind of role and organization, you have to have a lot of knowledge. So building up knowledge, doing research, doing surveys, doing a lot of conversation with people is essential to really be that organization that has this kind of know-how to talk about. But secondly, you also have to build up trust and also being a valid partner to others. You know, you have to be very constructive. You have to have solutions, not just protests, but also come up with ideas that could be a solution. And so we always try to be constructive, but have a critical distance towards decision makers, because we are definitely our own community, and we are not politicians, you know. So we have to be also very clear about who we are and what we're doing. And this kind of process takes a while. It's not something that you can have in a couple months, but I think you can start it, and in the pandemic you will get much more feedback of people because they see that there's a need for it. That's what we see all over the world at the moment, that you have night mayors, club commissions, organizations like that popping up all over the world because they see now it's a need to organize ourselves, to create a voice, to also write papers about what they actually want, not just complaining about things, you know, really about being part of the political discussion. And that is a long way to go, but I can just motivate and encourage people to do it now, because this is probably an important window in history. And if we don't take this, other people will then take the seat, and we will always be the ones that are left out.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you mentioned knowledge, and I know that your work has always involved a lot of the use of data and information. I mean, what kind of data is this? What kind of data do you have in Berlin, and what kind of data do you think is important to make your case?
So in Berlin, for instance, we have very specific data about venues and communities. So we know which venues are there before the pandemic and after pandemic, which had to close down. If yes, why? What is the reason for this change? We have information about, we surveyed a lot of promoters and club owners. What is the financial situation at the moment? Do you have losses? Do you survive? If yes, why? So, or how? So all these information are relevant if you want to make a point or an argument towards decision makers. You always have to have numbers in place. That's how, unfortunately, politics work. They're not based on emotions. They're based on facts and figures. And so you have to create these kind of facts and present them and make your argument. And yeah, I mean, economic data is relevant, social, cultural data, all the information are relevant, because the real estate industry, the retail industry, all the other industries have these numbers, but you don't.
Right. Do you think the economic numbers are very important? I mean, there's always this, seems to be always a very strong argument, that we must say that we generate jobs and that we generate income.
I don't think this is so relevant as people think. Yes, a lot of things are being argued with money, but I think in these times, when it comes to also recovery, also think about how our society has to come back together, stop polarization, also about attracting talents or talents that are being educated in your country are leaving the country. How can we make sure they stay here? These are all related somehow to culture. These are related to what you offer young people who want to be part of city society. And if you have a space where they can meet, where they can rehearse, where they can share ideas, that is so important. And I think that to make that case is much more important than to say how much people are employed and how much money is being made in nighttime. So I think the discussion is much bigger than just about the money. The discussion is about society. And for instance, in Berlin, we have elections this fall. And what we're doing now is we're surveying all the political parties and ask them 10 questions about certain issues, about music, about communities, how they support it, what they would do. And then we create a folder and social media assets and share it. And we say, it's your vote, go out and vote. And this is based on our questions, and these are the answers. And we basically give a better basis for decision making to elect. And voting is such an important part of putting pressure on decision makers to be part of a discussion. And so that's something that I can also recommend to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When are the next elections in Brazil?
Sorry?
When are the next elections in Brazil?
The end of next year. There will be presidential, Congress, and governors. Not local, though. Local was last year.
So now prepare, mobilize, and make nighttime and culture a case for political competition.
Yeah. As you know, we moved backwards a lot in Brazil in recent times.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So even the whole idea of culture is under threat, the whole of culture. So anyway, I'd like to talk about, diversity as an asset. Do you think that is also a key value of the club scene, the night scene? I mean, this is like a major contribution to society, the way clubs create these spaces for diversity. Is that something that should be highlighted more, you think?
I think it is important also for an internal discussion in nighttime communities, because you also have a very commercialized nightlife on one side, and you have a community and cultural driven nightlife on the other side. And I think it's also relevant to have this discussion in your community. How important is it to have headliners, bottle service, VIP areas? How important is it? Is it not better to come together? Is it not better to make it easier for people to access to cultural venues and cultural events? I think this diversity is also a concept that needs to be lived, and I think that we also have a long way to go in any ways. It's about involving POC communities. It's about involving more women in music. It's about the trans LGBTQ community. So we have a long way to go, and I think we also have to be very critical about ourselves in many ways.
Okay. Do you think the pandemic has also hampered nighttime advocacy as a whole? I mean, in the last years, we were seeing a lot of nighttime mayors and maybe a wider recognition of the importance of this whole sector. Do you think the pandemic, in any way has dampened that enthusiasm in a way?
I think it actually accelerated these kind of movements because suddenly people saw that you're more resilient if you have studies, if you have a person that can talk to government, if you have somebody who can give you advice or has access to funding, public money. I think it is very relevant now in the pandemic to have these kind of offices and organizations. But we also see that a lot of them were not powerful enough. They need more resources. They need more access to decision makers. So a lot of the nighttime mayors that I know also doing this voluntarily. They're not paid for what they do, So there is also a long way to go. But I think we all realize that it is better to have them than not having them.
Okay. Could you just, but thinking about now, restrictive measures that might happen in many places, like, do you think they can have an impact in the scene? Like, for example, curfews and restrictions of the public, number of people that can attend, and even registration of information that before wasn't necessary. Do you think that can have an impact in the scene, or people think, well, this is not the free space that it used to be? Just to understand what I'm trying to say.
I 100% think that this has a big impact, and we have to be very, very aware about it, because the idea of having safer spaces and to be also anonymous in the night and be maybe not exposed with photographers and data and registration is such an important part of being human and experience yourself and making connections that you maybe wouldn't have before. So we have to be very, very careful when we come out of this pandemic at one point, that we get our freedom back, that we fight for it. And this is not just something towards government. This is also something towards festival organizers and club owners to also be aware of it, that they also have a responsibility, because it's much easier to collect data and information and controlling and tracking everyone. But this is something that is part of our value system. I think that we have to make sure that nighttime is also getting its freedom back.
Okay. So now as a final question, how would you see the next months for Europe, for European scenes in general, in terms of opening up? What are the main hurdles now?
Well, I think the next weeks will be very essential. First of all, we are looking towards UK. We are looking towards Israel. How are countries where they have a high vaccination rate and they're also reopening their nighttime, that we are assessing this and monitoring how this happens, and if it's also not having any backslashes. But on the same time, we have to make sure that we start also a political dialogue about the fall, because in Germany, for instance, you can imagine that in September, October, the weather going to be significantly worse than it is at the moment. So it's going to be rain, it's going to be colder, people won't go outdoor, won't attend outdoor events anymore. And then we have to have solutions, and the solution must be indoor. And I think, you know, the next weeks are very critical to find already like a political dialogue about scenarios in the fall, because we also need some planning orientation. We cannot open up in 2 weeks. You know, we also need to plan, to book, to employ people. And so hopefully we can agree with the governments in the next weeks to find an opening date, and then also make sure, in case the numbers are, you know, significantly high, that we also have fallback situation, that maybe is PCR testing for everyone that wants to attend a venue. Vaccination rates needs to be higher. We also still have to work on that at this moment. So there's a lot of work to do in the next weeks. We also need to have technology that makes sure that people are not faking their tests, because outdoor, it is already critical, but indoor, it's a hazard. If you have somebody who's highly infected in a club space, it can be really a threat for other people.
So in Brazil, we have polls that say that 94% of the population wants to get vaccinated. I mean, do you know how much in Germany the rate is? I mean, are people really for vaccine, or do you have a sizable chunk of people of the population who just don't want to vaccinate?
There is a high number of people who don't want to be vaccinated. I don't know how this number is exactly, but I think there is also a lot of people right now who wait until maybe the pressure is too high because they need to be vaccinated to, for instance, to travel or to enter a venue. So I think right now we're still in a phase where we make offers, but I think the pressure is on, and I also think it's a good. It's necessary, because if you're healthy and you can be vaccinated, just do it. You know, that's the only thing you can do, and provide that we're getting out of this as soon as possible.
Okay, if you allow me just one more, I lied to you. This will be my last question actually. How much do you see this new scenario helping the local talent in terms of, because obviously DJs, artists are not going to be able to travel so much in the near future, in the near to mid future. Will that give a boost to local talent then?
I think it already does. I think in Berlin we can say that local talent is much better off at the moment getting bookings. Also, exclusivity is not as much as it was before, that you have only 1 gig per month in the city. There were contracts out there. I think they also got rid of it in many cases. So I think there is young talent, local talent has much more opportunities at this moment, for sure. But still, not all the venues are opening, only the outdoor venues. So yeah, this is the case at this very moment. I'm not sure if we can keep this up all towards the fall. We have to reopen indoor venues to make sure that this is the case as well. But I would agree with this thesis. There is also a new opportunities for local emerging artists to get on stage, for sure.
Okay, great. Okay, Lutz. Well, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon on a dance floor.
Yes, hopefully soon. I really would like to visit Brazil as soon as possible.
Yes,
thank you.
Sooner than later. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.